So as Nick said, my name is Emily GREER, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Congregate. And my talk today is called Breaking Labels, Core, Casual, and Other Misconceptions. And I want to give you a fair warning. Usually I do a lot of data. In this case, this talk is about half video game history and half rant on why I hate the term core gamer. So it's going to be a little bit different, but it was something that I felt sort of very personally and wanted to talk about. So. If you don't know Congregate, we are a browser game web platform on the web, kind of think YouTube for games, as well as a publisher on mobile. So some of our big games there are Tyrant Unleashed, Little Alchemist, Game of Thrones Ascent, Run, Sheep Happens, etc. As one of the few female CEOs in games, I'm kind of a go-to person if a reporter has a question about women in games. Even if I don't really know anything about it, they ask me. And a few months ago, I got this question from a reporter for a major magazine. What impact have casual games like the ones you have on Congregate had on attracting new female gamers to the mix? And I started to write an answer, but immediately got stuck. And the reason I got stuck was because there were a lot of assumptions baked into that question that I wasn't sure that I agreed with. The assumption that Congregate is a site for casual games, that women don't play games as much as men, and that women aren't attracted by games that aren't casual. So what I ended up doing was sitting down for an entire day and writing him a 2-page essay, the poor guy, on why I disagreed with his question. So that reply has turned into this talk, yeah. So to go into it, you really need to understand what a casual game is and answer that. So I went to the Casual Game Association website and our friend Jessica here to get a definition. So they're developed for the general public and families. Casual games are video games that are fun and easy to learn and play. They're non-violent, arcade-style games that involve puzzles, words, board and card games, game show, and trivia. And if Jessica says it, it must be true. So is Congregate a site for casual games? Well, this shows the 7 games that have had the most players on our site in the last 30 days. And the first 2, Adventure Capitalist and Clicker Heroes, are idle games. And while those aren't one of the genres she mentioned, I think they pretty solidly fall under the casual term. The next one, Contract Wars, is a FPS, though. And Bloons Monkey City, Tower Defense, it's kind of questionable. It's cute, but it's also something descended from a Warcraft 3 mod, so how casual is it? Dawn of the Dragons and Game of Thrones Ascent are both MMOs, and Tyrant Unleashed is a collectible card game. So in terms of Congregate being a site for casual games. And if you look at our demographics, they fit the classic core gamer stereotype. It's overwhelmingly male, very high number of hours spent on games per week. They play and buy a lot of console games. So this is why I get really uncomfortable with the terms core and casual. It gets really muddy. If you look at site like Congregate, that is, where the audience is, very focused male core gamer demographic, and yet the number 5 game that's been played on our site all time is Learn to Fly 2, a cute penguin launch game that anybody could pick up and play. But the real reason why I hate core and casual is because when you use the word core gamer, you're automatically devaluing the experiences of a healthy percentage of the game population, particularly that of females and older generations. And at this point, I'm both. When you say something is core, you're saying anything that's not core is peripheral. And that's something that is a little hard to take. Also, if you look at the definition of the word casual, it's something that you don't do regularly. It's something irregular, not permanent. But my friend Lida is a great example of why that's a pretty bad assumption. Lida fits the classic casual game stereotype. She's a female in her mid-40s who likes to play solitaire on her phone. She and I were talking a few weeks ago, and she mentioned that she'd never considered herself a gamer, but when she looked at the stats on her solitaire game, she was shocked to realize how much she was playing. I was nosy and curious and asked her to send me screenshots of her games, and she did. And then, because she's a chemistry PhD, she did a thorough analysis of all the games she's been playing, how much time, her win rates, etc. So she has, on her iPhone 6, which she can't have had for more than about 20 weeks because it released in September, she's played almost 300 hours of solitaire. That's an average of 15 hours per week. She prefers the games that are more challenging. If she's winning, 70%, she switches to another game. She also tracks her win rate over time and to see whether she's making progress. And when you look at that, what's casual about that? It's a non-violent game that's familiar from offline play, but that's about it. Here's another woman who breaks the labels that we've been using. This is my grandmother, who is a very nice upper middle class lady from Waco, Texas, who died 25 years ago and never touched a computer in her life. But she was a gamer. She was a huge fan of bridge and mahjong. She belonged to local clubs to play, that met weekly to play for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, as well as playing with friends in between time. She was very skilled and very competitive about it. So competitive and so skilled, in fact, that the first sign that the family had that she was going senile was when my mom saw her misplay a bridge trick, because she never misplayed bridge tricks. In video games, we'd call bridge and mahjong casual games because they're card games. But if you think about the gameplay, that doesn't really make sense. They're deep, they're high skill, they're co-op PvP multiplayer. You know what that looks like? That's like League of Legends. And I don't think that the core source of emotional satisfaction that my grandmother got from playing bridge or mahjong is really different from a League of Legends player today. There's achievement, there's skill, there's competitive drive, there's social connection, and I don't see what would be different. If you look back at history, games are some of the most universal elements of culture. Every culture every ancient culture from every continent had some form of board games, with the oldest specimens going back 5,000 years. And games were amongst the first elements to spread culture to culture faster than a lot of other knowledge. So playing cards, for example, were invented in China in the 9th century. They got to Egypt about 300 years later, where they ended up taking on the form of 4 suits, 52 card decks that we're used to. They got to Europe, where they were used mostly by the kings and queens and were hand-painted until printing came along and they could be mass-produced relatively cheaply, and then they became broadly popular. By the 19th century, card games and board games were the sort of dominant social activities for most of the elites and anybody with leisure. And with the modern industrial economy, leisure was increasing. If you've read any Jane Austen, you'll find that the characters are playing cards a lot. Pride and Prejudice has like 7 or 8 major scenes that turn around who's playing what card game at what table and people chatting over that. One important thing about card games and board games of this era is that they're inherently social, which means that they pass not from individual to individual, really, but from group to group and community to community, with the rules and skills being taught person to person. So they had this tremendous social endorsement that, this is what you're supposed to be doing with your friends, with your family. When video games arrived in the 70s, they spread really differently, though. So you've got, arcade games and PC games and the first home consoles, and you've got joysticks and keyboards and screens that you have to crowd around. They were single player in a different way, and they were necessarily a lot more individual. The other thing is that they were not so universal. Arcade games were a destination. Home PCs and consoles were specialty hardware that you had to buy. So what ended up happening is that they became adopted by the adventurous, the novelty seekers, and the early tech adopters, so who were overwhelmingly male rather than a whole group and a whole community. The original consoles were marketed broadly to families, but the game industry quickly realized who was buying and doubled down on the taste of young men. With Doom, first-person shooters became one of the most popular genres, and as graphics got better, the blood spatter could get more realistic and female breasts could get less realistic. The other thing that happened is that there was such a density of players and adopters in young males that it went from being something that was a geeky subculture to something that everyone did, which is more like the way it spread with community to community with other games. So when everybody's playing, you draw in people who are otherwise hesitant, and you learn the skills and you learn the rules person to person. So guys, because there were so many young males playing, males who might not otherwise have started to play games or might not have been attracted to them were pulled in. But just because women and older generations weren't willing to go out and buy specialized hardware to play unfamiliar games, it doesn't mean that they weren't playing games. Microsoft bundled Solitaire with Windows starting in 1990, and throughout the 1990s, you couldn't walk into an accounting department without having somebody quickly hide their screen to hide the fact that they were playing Solitaire. Once the internet took off, the browser portals started putting card games and board games on their sites for people to play, and quickly they became the most popular content on these browser portals. And they discovered that the audience was older and female, which is exactly the opposite of what they were expecting based on the stereotypes of gamers. After the dot-com crash, PopCap with Bejeweled demonstrated that you could get this type of audience to try new genres, to try new gameplay, and pay for it if you let them try it first. And that was a big innovation, and the price was reasonable. So by 2007, if you look at the industry stats, the demographics of gaming were really, really broad. But they were also really, really segregated. Instead of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, it was really more men are from Xbox or Steam, and women are from Big Fish or Yahoo Games. And the effect of this kind of segregation was pretty intense in that gaming was a mass experience and a mass audience, but for most gamers that weren't in that sort of core male game stereotype, it was a kind of a silent phenomenon and an individual one. People were playing games, but they weren't talking to each other about them, and they didn't have a lot of visibility in the industry, which is one of the reasons why Casual Connect Conference was invented. It wasn't, well, there was some social activity, especially on a site like Pogo where there was real-time chat. You were chatting with strangers, and you were, rather than friends and family. And a lot of the people playing didn't identify as gamers, and often felt sort of shame that they were wasting time. So social gaming really upended this paradigm. So instead of going to some place to get a game, now the games were coming to you where you were having normal social activity. And then on top of that, they were coming in with both social pressure and social acceptance, like my crops are dying, can you help me? So that really changed how people were looking at games. People complained about spam, but they were making something that had been hidden visible, and they sort of embraced, and by making it visible, it gave the social acceptance that a lot of people needed to feel comfortable playing games again and to allow games to become a really mass experience. The other thing that happened was the switch to free-to-play becoming the dominant business model. The industry had always struggled with people, with the players who wanted to play one or two games for a long time rather than switching from game to game to game. The in MMOs, they had handled that with subscriptions. Console games had switched to sort of the pseudo subscription of the annual sequel of Madden and Call of Duty and DLC. But casual games had sort of limped along with an ad-supported model. Once we got to free to play, that type of customer who's playing the same game for a really long time is desirable, because as long as you can continue to push content that's attractive and that they want to buy, the revenue is uncapped. Mobile's pushed things even farther. Now, not only is the penetration in terms of audience just as high as PC, but it's always with us, and that gives it an advantage over any other gaming platform for any other gamer. Console gamers and social gamers are going to the same 2 app stores to get their games and sharing just one big chart together showing what the top free and top grossing games are, and this is having some interesting effects. For one, it means that games targeted directly to females are getting much more industry attention than they would have in the past. For example, in the last year, the Kim Kardashian game has gotten just as much industry attention as Hearthstone. And at the same level of success on just Big Fish and Yahoo Games, I don't think that would have happened. I think it would have been, sort of like a little blip that nobody paid much attention to. But the more important effect is that players are getting exposed to games and genres and types of themes that that never would have been marketed to them in the past, and they're finding that they like them. A good example of that is my friend Megan, who is another classic casual gamer. She's in her 30s and has played puzzle games and word games on her phone for a long time now. And when she was younger, she used to love to play Oregon Trail. But she got bored with Candy Crush this summer and decided to start playing Clash of Clans because it was the next game on the list and because she'd seen a commercial. She'd never played a strategy game before. She'd never played a multiplayer game that wasn't Words with Friends. But 6 months later, she's an elder in a competitive clan and with strangers that she's never met. And she'll sneak away from parties to, optimize things when a guild war is going on. And she's spending money, which is most important for the industry. So she had no idea that these are things she would have liked. These are things that would not have been marketed to her, but she loves them, and they're now a major hobby. And it goes both ways. I see, as Congregate's part of GameStop, and I've seen surveys of GameStop's heavy console buyers, and let me tell you, they're playing a lot of Candy Crush and a lot of casual games. So the thing about this is it means that mobile games can be mass experiences in a way that hasn't been true for a very long time. And it means that, among other things, Super Bowl commercials make sense because everybody watching the Super Bowl is a true potential customer of Clash of Clans. So if we're starting to transcend this, why am I ranting about the terms core and casual? Well, one is that, I feel like the terms are so deeply embedded in all of us and such an easy shortcut to jumping to a certain type of person that they are kind of warping our expectations of what's possible and harming how we, design, market, and monetize games. And we need to sort of break from that to really free ourselves. We realize that the labels are breaking, so we started throwing some compromise band-aids at it, like mid-core. But the definitions that I see for mid-core are core games on accessible platforms with better tutorials. They're not really stepping back from our sort of core assumptions about who our players are and how they want to interact with games. It broadens the audience a little bit, but I don't think it really gives full value to the universality of games. And this looked okay on my computer, but the aspect ratio seems to be different here. So at the top on the red, this is a different way of potentially splitting the audience. Taking into groups, the 3 groups are novelty seekers, one game hobbyists, and then the green, it's true casual. And the idea is that you would break it into these groups and then lay that on top of genre, whether it's FPS or puzzle, and that would give you a sense of who your customers are and divorce game distribution preferences and consumption preferences from genre preferences. So novelty seeker is somebody who's going to be always looking for new twists in genre, theme, and gameplay. They're what the game industry has traditionally served the best, and for them, shorter games and a paid model are probably going to result in the highest revenue for the industry. For a one-game hobbyist, that's whether it's my friend Lyda playing Solitaire or somebody playing World of Tanks, it's somebody who's going to dedicate themselves for years to playing one game as long as the content keeps expanding and it continues to be interesting. And the best model for these people is free to play because it uncaps revenue as along with their time. And then finally, the true casual, to me, while I've been ranting about core, I don't think casual is a terrible phrase. We just need to use it more precisely. There is a casual gamer. That's somebody who's going to pick up a game, once or twice a year for a week or two. And, they're kind of hard to keep and hard to attract. For them, familiarity and nostalgia are going to be the best lures. But familiarity looks different now than it did 15 to 20 years ago. The games of people's childhoods are no longer necessarily card games. It could be Tetris, it could be Doom, it could be Oregon Trail, it could be a lot of things like that lure them in. And licensed IP is likely to help with that too. They're harder to figure out what the best business model is because it's going to be hard to get them to spend either way, but ad-supported free-to-play is likely the best because it's sort of guaranteed some monetization, and there's some chance that if they get matched with the right game, they could become a true hobbyist. The other way of looking at this is it kind of helps give you a framework for understand some of the things that might happen in the future. For example, virtual reality. When you look at that, I see that as something that's going to be attractive to novelty seekers and people willing to spend on dedicated hardware, which again means that it's likely to be another round of sort of young males and dedicated sort of people dedicated and interested in technology and new things who are going to go after it. That means it's also likely that paid games are the best model. If the hardware becomes broadly useful for other things, then we're likely to see broad adoption. It seems a little unlikely, but in that case, it could become a true mass audience part of the industry, like mobile games, though otherwise I think it's likely just to be a lucrative but large niche. So when we think about core and casual and the labels that we use, we need, and as long as we stick to just those two labels, we're underserving all gamers. The good news is that we have an industry which is a truly mass industry at this point. Everybody plays games the way everybody watches TV or goes to movies or listens to music. But we would never talk about a core moviegoer or a core music listener. There are genres, and the genres may have demographic tilts, but may have demographic tilts, but the audience, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have a casual or enthusiast fan of any genre. I can be an enthusiast fan of indie rock and a casual fan of hip hop and opera, and that all can be true. And the movie executives may try to lure in young male audiences in the summer with action movies, but they know that those movies are not going to be successful on a mass level if they can't get women and older people in to enjoy them too. And that's the way that we should be thinking about games. games are more than that. Gamers are more than just two little boxes, and the industry should be as well. So, anyway, that's it. Thank you for listening to my rant, and you can ask me any questions.
Well, thank you, Emily. And Jessica, if you hear, it will not be Casual Connect next year. It'll be Novelty Seeking Connect, I think. So we have chance for maybe one quick question. Well, maybe I will ask the question.
Okay.
Social casino. What are the demographics of people playing social casino? It's one of the hot genres that's growing these days.
It's not my genre, so okay. I don't know. But I would expect it would be older and slightly tilted male-female. But I'd ask somebody who's actually in the industry. But my point is that you could be playing social casino and puzzle and Clash of Clans all together, and that could be one particular person, and it doesn't define who you are.
Okay. And if people want to come and talk to you afterwards, do you have a booth here and a stand?
Yes, we do have a booth somewhere in here that I have not been to yet, but please come and visit us there.
Okay.